Welcome back to the In Chamber. I'm your host, Tom Schumann. That is the 100th time I've had the privilege of stating that phrase as we close in on the end of season 4 of the In Chamber. I'll have that opportunity one more time as I'm retiring from my current role at the end of July. But don't worry, after a short break between seasons, the In Chamber will return with the talented communications team at the Chamber leading the way. And producers Tony Spatero, the brainchild behind the origination of this podcast, will still be making the magic happen behind the scenes. Thanks to all those who have listened to our conversations thus far, and I encourage you to continue to do so in the future. But now, on to this 100th episode, and it is a special one, with a trio of guests talking about their new venture that is much more than just a business. It's an effort to play a role in helping bring answers, bring peace, let's say, to the more than 200,000 cold cases involving murdered or missing people in the United States. Ashley Fujawa, Anna Eaglin, and Jim Brown, welcome to the In Chamber.
Hi.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Each of you has various ties and connections to Indiana companies and to each other, and we'll touch on those during the conversation. But Ashley, I want to start with you. Explain a little bit how Uncoveredcom came about.
Yeah. So this has been an idea that we have been working on for about 18 months, but really we have kicked it into hyperdrive about the last 6, creating an opportunity for people to come in and look at all of the information related to unsolved cases of the murdered and missing. So that means we're pulling in all the publicly available data into one centralized location, one database. So all the news stories that you might see, podcasts you may listen to, documentaries, public records, all of the digital footprint that exists on a case in one spot, but we're also overlaying maps, data points, photographs, and engaging the community in specific calls to action to crowdsource the gaps in those more than 200,000 cold cases. And this kind of came about, Jim, Anna, and I all are interested in unsolved cases. We all had separate conversations about our interest, but kind of coalescing around the idea that there's not one central location to find information that's publicly verified that will let you dive in more into a case, but then also take it to the next level and do something else. We've organized ourselves as a public benefit corp to make sure that what we are creating will put good back into the world. So IDing an opportunity for people to have those specific calls to action, using their own platform to share information, filling in those gaps where we see in a case, but also learning more. We have a whole education component with our community where we're bringing in people who are already doing some of this online resource, some of the citizen detective work, but providing an opportunity for knowledge transfer, interacting with experts, and then rolling up their sleeves and actually working on these cases together.
Ashley, not only did you provide excellent information there, you just set up a whole series of follow-up questions that I have, so I appreciate it. But before we get to some of those, Anna, I want to ask you and Ashley were roommates at Indiana University and shared again, as she said, a special interest in this topic. I know you also have a very personal connection to this issue and this mission. Could you talk about that a little bit, share that piece of the story?
Yeah, definitely. So we actually were not roommates. We worked together at a dormitory, and it was a dormitory of single rooms. So we were the kind of people who didn't want roommates. So very gotcha. Specifically. But we were coworkers at the Wilkie Center desk. Go Hoosiers. And so that's where we met. That's where we both discovered we had the similar interests because we would work together quite a bit. And then while we were in college, actually in 2004, my cousin Molly Dattilo went missing in Indianapolis. Still a cold case, still unsolved. And so for me, Molly and I, we grew up in the same town. Of course, we knew of each other. We went to different high schools. We weren't super close. Even kind of relational wise, we're, I think, second or third cousins. But I was able to see kind of how the family all kicked into high gear. I mean, luckily we are a family that had resources. We have, people in law, we had people in media, and everybody who was even tangentially related to Molly was there to do something. And so, Ashley recalls, I didn't actually recall this, but she recalls us like printing out flyers, when we worked at the Wilkie Center desk. And I drove around Bloomington with a flyer on the back of my car for a couple months. maybe up to 6. But other than that, I really felt like I didn't really know what else to do. I didn't know how to help. And that feeling has always really stuck with me when I consume true crime content, when I see it out there. I just remember feeling like, this information is really interesting. But these are real people and these are real stories. And if I'm a person who wants to help, how can I help? What do I do? Even trying to understand information about a case, every couple of years, I would look up Molly's case just to kind of, has there been any new information that I just haven't heard about? That's information is all scattered everywhere. It's in a news article here, or it's, somewhere else. And just to have one place to say, this is the most up-to-date information we have about a case, or these are the things that we're looking into. We just saw that as such an opportunity to really, that technology could really play a big role there.
Yeah, we're going to get to that technology in just a second. Jim, I know you worked with Ashley at TechPoint and with Anna at Innovate Map. So collaborations you've had previously. You've been an entrepreneur, an investor in multiple tech companies. What excites you about this unique venture and the prospects through this approach that Uncovered.com is taking?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for the career that I've been able to have in technology. I've spent the last 15 years basically either leading companies or selling software for these companies in the B2B space. And don't get me wrong, again, very grateful for that, but it's hard to wake up every day and sell another B2B SaaS application to another company. And, after doing it for so long, I just wanted to do something that meant something. In 2007, my best friend passed away. From complications between diabetes and obesity. And at his funeral, I sang some lyrics from a song from Buff Daddy that said, "Through your family, I'll fulfill your dreams." And I meant it then, but I didn't know what it meant then. And as we have really started to see this true social justice movement coming, the answer revealed itself, and this is it. And so for me, this is the ability to turn the tech experience and business experience that I have and join two amazing co-founders to actually build technology and use those skills for good.
Well, you've all touched a little bit on data and technology, so I'll throw this out to the group, whoever wants to jump in, but talk about how those are so critical to this, how technology is going to be utilized to advance these efforts.
One big way we see that happening is, again, there's no one place to really go to learn more about these cases, to see all of this information. So number one, that doesn't exist, which is, I think, very shocking to people. It was really shocking to us. But secondly, if you want to learn more information about these cases, it's generally oriented in a very narrative form, or it's very fact-based. They were this tall, they had this kind of hair color and this color eyes, and that's it. And you're not seeing a lot of context. So number one, we believe pulling all the information together is valuable. It's valuable because it exists in one place. People can get the most up-to-date information and they can see it how to help. And number two, we don't believe that we're doing necessarily anything that's new. This is a really common technology playbook to take information that exists, information that people want, and bring it all back together. We see it's got, longer reaching implications than something like real estate listings or flight information. However, it's a really common tech tactic, and we see it being so valuable here, but also just taking that data and showing it in a different way. So Ashley alluded to this, but not only do we have information about the person, we have the background of them. We have all the important people that were part of the case. We have the timeline of events, which we know in understanding a case, a timeline is so important. Where was a person? Why were they there? Who were they with? And then tying that into mapping out of those locations. So again, bringing all that data together, helping people understand and consume it in a different way, and then setting up the infrastructure to, ideally apply more complex data science to it. So that's really the vision of where we want to go, is to take some of this, again, this technology that exists, that has been proven, that is useful, and then apply it to some of these cases to say, what are we missing? Where are the big gaps here, and how can people help?
Well, isn't this a strategy I would assume that law enforcement uses with every single case, as far as at least the gathering of information, but they don't have a forum or maybe a way to share that with everybody, but you're taking a similar approach and you're bringing tens and hundreds of thousands of more people to the table who, as was mentioned before we started recording today, may know something about this.
Yeah, you nailed it right there, Tom. I think it is bringing the public with us, right? Like there's this fascination around true crime content, the documentaries and the podcast. Netflix can't create enough of this. So there's a huge interest in it. But what we're really starting to see over the last few years is that shift from the consumption of the content for entertainment purposes to a desire for advocacy and wanting to do something, wanting to do more, but not knowing how. And that's what we want to be able to provide. You talked specifically about law enforcement, and you're spot on, right? Like law enforcement, it's a walled garden though. I'll give a very specific example. Right here in Indianapolis, there's the 40-year-old cold case of the Burger Chef murders. 4 teenagers in Speedway, Indiana, disappeared and were found murdered later after their shift. I spoke to First Sergeant Bill Dalton with the Indiana State Police. And when I was in his office, he literally pointed behind me to 6 4-inch binders of information about the case. And he said, Jim, that's the case right there. I said, what do you mean that's the case? He goes, that's literally all of the information we have, right? Again, a 40-year-old cold case. So he has an analyst on his team that has gone page by page, putting all of this stuff into an Excel spreadsheet. But even once they've done that, there's still no connection between it, right? So if I list Tom, right, because that might have been the handwritten note, Tom was at point A at 8:52. Great. And then 10 pages later, I see another Tom. Is that the same Tom? Can we correlate that the two of them were in the same place at the same time? So there's all of that opportunity for them. But now, once they, meaning law enforcement, see that they have gaps, now they can specifically call our community, the public, to action around something very intentional, as opposed to giving out the entire case.
Tell us a little bit more about the website, if you would. We encourage all the listeners to visit Uncovered.com, experience it for themselves, but talk about what people will find there, some of the basic information, and then I know there's also memberships where people can kind of go to a deeper level.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about what that Uncovered.com experience is going to be like. So going there, you're going to be able to see kind of all of the resources we put together. So we've created content, again, like Ashley said, around citizen detective work, how to do these kinds of things. But if you go over to the cold cases side of the site, you can see all of the cases that we have visualized. And this is where we've taken a case, we've done, we pulled together all the information about a case and broken it down into its most important pieces and put that back together so people can really understand a case and how, again, the timeline came together, the important locations, the important people. So this is this part of the database we're actively working to expand. We are a startup, so this is a pretty manual process to begin with. So we're slowly bringing these in and getting as many cases as we can on the site. But this is really where we're going to hopefully expand and grow and be that comprehensive database that we want to be. And then the other really big piece of what we're doing is building that community. And I'll let Ashley talk a little bit about what that entails.
Yeah, so we're curating a group of people who want to do more. So we're currently have people in our community learning from each other, embarking in trainings. We actually partnered with the Freedom of Information Coalition to do a 3-day boot camp, if you will, on public records, like how to request them, what to do, how to go through that process. So we see so many people are wanting more information and wanting to do their own research. But then there's also that opportunity for knowledge transfer. We have people who are in our community who are former librarians, school teachers, people who have worked in law enforcement, but we also have data analysts who have, a very different day job, but they're using those skills that they've developed professionally and want to fine tune and using them on case research. With people who are really interested in forensic genealogy, we just have a lot of different people with different varied backgrounds, but there's been no location for them to go to do this work with each other or to do it in a way that will have a concerted effort. So often people come to us and say, I've already started a Google spreadsheet, or I have this document. We've been able to pull that together and amplify that and bring more people into the discussion.
Has the depth of that interest surprised any of you? I know, Jim, you mentioned that certainly the podcast, the television shows, the content of people who are interested in this, but the reactions, in the last few weeks since you've made the announcement about what you're doing, talk about that a little bit. And again, has it even surprised you a little bit of how many people are so genuinely interested?
For me personally, I don't think it has surprised us. I think if anything, what we constantly hear, Tom, is why doesn't something like this already exist? Why isn't this already out there, right? And we agree, it should be out there. It's interesting what Anna talked about with, from a technology standpoint, this isn't new. We're just applying technology to a space that hasn't been done before. Now, don't get me wrong. You can go on Reddit and you can find Facebook groups and you can find all these disparate sources. But if you've been to any of those places, you very quickly see the rabbit hole that can get into conspiracy theories or name calling and just that kind of a toxic culture. And so as we moderate our community, we want truth to rise to the top, don't get me wrong, but we're also going to maintain a civil community and conversation around these cases.
I think that's key, is this notion of putting empathy back into a genre or an interest that a lot of times people think is devoid of that. Our focus is always on the victims first. So when you come to our site, when you interact with our cases, you'll see a detailed case narrative to get to know who the person was. Then we'll dive into all the details because that's where we need your help. And then we'll have those very concerted calls to action of how you yourself can make an impact on these cases. We want to make sure that people feel like they're part of this process, but we also know that this community isn't for everyone. There's so many people consuming true crime content. We want to at least provide one sort of ground where people can come and get verified information. Then as they start to move through that kind of channels of how they want to get involved, we want to be there along the way to show them how easy it is and truly move people just from consumption and interest in this space, but advocacy for people and for families.
How about additional reactions in the last few weeks? I know the people coming forward wanting to help. You're also crowdfunding. You're looking to raise some funding to support what you're already doing. What's the reaction been in that area?
It's been positive. It's been wonderful to see so many people raise their hand and want to get involved. Actually, a very specific instance, we had a family member reach out for a case that they asked if we could feature, and it's from, the mid 70s. She was a junior at IU who went missing and then was found murdered. They have been working for nearly 40 years now to get information on this case. So they reached out to us to ask if we can help to visualize. We're currently working with our team now. Within 2 hours of them reaching out, another person reached out with the exact same case and said, I don't even know if her family is still around, but we lived on the same dorm. And this has stuck with me since that happened. So for us, that completely underscores what we're building and our own research that we did in 2020, where we asked 500 people who were interested just in true crime alone, what would get you to act? Number one was knowing the victim. In this instance, we see a family member has reached out. Number two was some sort of semblance around the location, knowing what happened. It was your hometown. You went to school there. You grew up there. That's exactly what happened in the second case. And then number three for us was just people needed to know what to do. So just ask. And we have a whole community that we're curating now, and people are joining us every day who want to just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I have this superpower. I want to be able to use these skills. So in that instance alone, all three of those things were underscored for us.
I think one of the things that has stuck out to me as well is the amount of people that say, hey, I want to help. I want to support you. I want this thing to exist, but I don't have the time to actually be a citizen detective. I don't have the time to do the research, but I want to push that forward. And so they've asked, how do we give you money? And this was happening before the crowdfunding that we started to do. And now it's just giving them that outlet to do it. So that's been very interesting to see as well. But it's been everybody. I mean, we've had content creators in the podcast and documentary space reach out to us. We've had families, as Ashley mentioned. We've had members of law enforcement. We've had prosecutors, conversations with different people that they're all like, wait a minute, one, why doesn't this already exist? But two, how can we now help you and get involved? And so that's been a lot of fun to see.
And I want to ask you about the B Corporation. Ashley mentioned that. We did a series in our Biz Voice magazine a few years ago on corporate social responsibility with some stories on B Corps being part of that. Explain for the listeners a little bit what that means and how it impacts you go about your business with Uncovered.com.
Yeah, definitely. So, it was really important for us to, there's two sides of this and what we went about. Number one, we think it's important that our company is not a nonprofit. So we believe that in order to hire the best people to build this, we think that's one of the big reasons that this doesn't exist, is because people haven't found a profitable and sustainable way to do something like this. So that is our goal, is we want to do this. We think it is so important, but we also want this to be an idea that is sustainable, and we can build a team and we can continue to do this work. But at the same time, we believe that there is a higher good, and we don't see us building like $1 billion unicorn that's, trying to get acquired in a year. Our goal is we have a change we want to see in the world. Our really long-term goal is we want to lower the number of unsolved cases that exist. That's kind of our big, hairy goal that we want to achieve. And B Corp was the best way for us to do this. It allows us to say, we believe that we have a social good, we have a social impact. We want to be held to that. We want people to hold us accountable to that. And we want to be transparent about how we're going about it, but we're not going to be a nonprofit at the same time.
The one thing I would add to that, Tom, is the stakeholder and I guess fiduciary responsibility, right? So with your traditional Delaware C corporation, the number one stakeholder is shareholders and shareholder value. And as you kind of mentioned in my introduction, like I've invested in companies, I've started companies, I've sold companies, I've been very fortunate in that space. But when you have to make decisions based solely on shareholder value and shareholder return, it sometimes causes you to take shortcuts or make decisions that aren't in the best interest of the public and things like that. So when you talk about corporate responsibility, that's what the B corporation is all about. So our number one stakeholder as a public benefit corporation is public interest. And so we have a mission, and our mission is to bring peace to the families of murdered and missing people, reduce the burden on law enforcement, help influence public policy in equality of criminal justice reform, and then hopefully start overturning wrongful convictions. So that's our stated mission. And now the decisions that we make, as long as we are holding true to those stakes in the ground, we're good. Now, don't get me wrong. We still have shareholders that want a return, but their return is both public return, public good, as well as a financial return on their investment. And so we're being able to do both of those with the B Corporation.
Excellent. You've all said this so far as part of the mission of why you're doing this, but I want to read a quote from Ashley that when this was announced, that to me really kind of gets to the core of it, and maybe ask you to comment even more. So the quote was, even those who dedicated their lives to figuring out what happened to their loved ones won't know everything they need to know to solve a case, but lots of people know something. If we can gather all those pieces, we can activate a community around finding answers, end quote. So I said it in different words, in Ashley's words. You've all said it in different words, but that's really the core of what you're doing here, isn't it?
Yeah. We know not everyone knows everything, but everyone knows something. And to be able, again, to pull people together and impart collective impact in a space that needs it, that there's so many people interacting in their own ecosystems, consuming this information, but so many family members who need help, so many law enforcement agencies that are actively asking the public, if you've seen something, say something. We are creating a platform to be able to do that and streamline that process, and hopefully bring everyone along for the same journey so they feel represented, they feel listened to, and they feel like they're actually making an impact.
The three of us, Tom, we come from that business tech background. So we understand how to build a website. We understand how to send out email newsletters, and we understand how to even talk to the media, right? And have those conversations. But when you think about the families and loved ones of these people who have gone missing or are found murdered, they don't have all those skills. And so now if they want to know what's going on with their case, what do? Right? They'll reach out to the member of law enforcement and say, hey, well, we haven't made any progress or X, Y, and Z, right? They're like, well, what can I do? And they'll start to go build a website. Well, they don't know HTML. They don't know how to create a WordPress site or anything like that. Then they actually have media reach out to them and say, okay, we want to help you cover this story. Give us the facts of the case. Give us all the details. Like, where do I begin? Like, I've got shoe boxes full of stuff that I've been doing on my own because I don't know what to do. So being able just to help the family members organize this information and give them a place to point to, I thought it was fascinating. A few months ago, we were working on a case. I forget how old this case is. It's at least 10 years old, but Karen Bodine. And we got to meet her daughters out in Seattle, Washington. And it was amazing. They bought billboards, and they previously were driving traffic to a site that they purchased, a URL. They changed the URL on their billboards to Uncoveredcom because we had more information in a way that people could consume than they could keep up with on their own site. And I mean, that's just a fascinating thing, that they would be willing to spend money to drive people to go to our site because they know our community is willing to reach out and help them. So again, just providing those tools for all kinds of different people, it's just critically important.
Yeah, Jim, that's amazing. We've talked a lot. We've talked with the business perspective and certainly what you're doing and bringing people together. I've got to ask each of you to weigh in on the emotional part of this. you've touched on it, how you're helping people, helping family members, but as you hear these stories and you see actions like what you just described, how does it affect you from a personal standpoint?
Yeah, we talk a lot about this actually as a team. We were actually talking about it at our meeting last night. I mean, it does take an emotional toll, but we also feel in this space that that's almost, if you can consume this information, the tax is to do something with it, and how much better you will feel that you're not just taking all of this information in, but your out product is something that can entice someone else to do something to help. But also knowing that these are individual people. So often it gets turned into a giant number, 200,000. Those to lose names, lose faces, lose a voice. Each case, we are critical of this is who the person is, this is what they enjoy doing, this is their background. We do that over and over again as a team too, and reminding ourselves of these are the individual people that we're helping. And then getting to work alongside some really tremendous people in this space. We always say this space is built for collaboration and not competition. People want to help. They want to take their time, they want to take their talents, and they want to put it to something good. Even the amazing content creators that we've been working with, they spend so much time developing an episode that they want to work with us to give it legs again, to give it a new life, to get in front of people. And then the family members and family advocates that we're working alongside. As Jim say, why doesn't something like this exist? They're toiling away trying to get these stories out. They look around and say, there's so many other people doing the same thing. So let's do it together. Let's lock arms and let's be much stronger together.
Yeah, Anna, we talked about your family connection earlier, but again, how it impacts you personally, the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I'll reiterate too what Jim said. It's to be able to take the skills that we've learned, like building tech and working with startups like all these years, and apply it to this is like, number one, I feel like we're so lucky that we get to do this work, that we get to be part of this community, that this community, has embraced us. I think the thing that, like, for me, it does sometimes, so I mean, sometimes these cases, it feels like we'll never know. We'll just never know on some of these cases we dig in deep. But then there's, we just read a story the other day where, they found an unidentified person, and a random person on the internet was like, hey, this looks like a missing person that I've been working on. Done. Case solved. So, I mean, sometimes it just takes one person to make a connection. It just takes, one person who looked at something a little differently. I mean, that I think is what is so motivating, is it's just some of these cases just need attention. And if we can bring those to the forefront, especially cases that don't get media attention, if you're a person of color, especially a woman of color, if you're LGBTQ, if you're trans, your case is not going to get the media attention a lot of others do. And if we can do that and we can elevate these stories and someone can make a connection, one connection, it's all worth it.
Yeah, the emotional tax is real. I'm the father of a 7-year-old little boy. And so when I read about the cases and dive into the cases that involve children, it's just, it's hard. It's truly hard. And, all of us, we need breaks. Like, we have to step away from this stuff from time to time. And one of the things, as Ashley kind of alluded to, we had a conversation this week, like, at some point, we're probably going to need a therapist on staff, not just for us, but for the people in our community and for the family members. They need a break as well. One of our advisors we have is, she's the family advocate. Her sister was found murdered, and being able to give them permission to take a break, right? Like, hey, go be you again. We got this. And to be able to do that for people, I think is just fascinating. And the relief that you can see come off of them, for them just knowing someone else besides me cares. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. As you say, for individuals to try to restore some type of balance and not be over-consumed with the important work that they're doing. Anna, you touched on the minority community, and certainly the things we've seen in the last 15 months with the pandemic starting, and then the social justice efforts. And how has that impacted how you've gone about your work? I know you said you strongly focused on this during that time frame, but talk about the desire, any of you, the desire to truly make a difference for those minority communities that might be faced with these circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, for us, again, we've always been very, very motivated by the cases that don't get that attention, that don't necessarily fall into, there is something called, I think it's called the missing white girl syndrome, where, the percentage of cases that are actually missing white women, it's generally rich white women. They generally get like 76% of the media coverage. And so our goal is to really elevate those people who are just not getting, who maybe don't have the means, or, maybe they were, engaged in drugs or engaged in sex work. And that doesn't mean that their life wasn't valuable. It doesn't mean that their case doesn't deserve attention. So we actually, one of our colleagues, has a data science background, and she's built an algorithm to score cases. And we highly score cases that don't have media attention, that feature a person of color, because we want to make sure that we are being equitable. We are representing those that aren't being shown in the media, because again, most of these cases are the ones that people just have not taken a look at. And if we can just get some eyes on it, we can make a huge impact.
We're already seeing that now, where the cases that we are featuring, a lot of them people haven't heard of. So we'll have content creators reach out to be like, I had no idea this case existed, or we'll have people in the community, thank you for shining a light. This is in my hometown and no one else had talked about this case. Now we're creating this flywheel of information. So as people reach out to us to say that they haven't heard about this case, they want to then cover it on their platform. So they want to reach out to their audience and their network to share this. Then the people in our community want to reach out to their network and share it. So now we're creating this proliferation of information that's going out, which is key to making sure that more people interact with these cases, engage with them, see the information, see what's needed, and just start to talk about them and keep those front of mind. We always want to make sure that the people who didn't get proper representation in the media, in the community, or in the justice system are first and foremost featured on our site. And we're continuing to do that. But that doesn't mean that other cases shouldn't get covered. So we're adding those in as well, because we know that people want a central location to find that information. We're just very critical of what we're bringing in and what we're pushing out to make sure that inclusion is top of mind.
So Jim, you've mentioned law enforcement a couple of times. You referenced the case in Speedway 40 plus years ago. What steps are important for your team to take to make sure that the relationship with law enforcement is viewed as cooperative and in no way is seen as adversarial or anything? What are some keys to working with law enforcement on this?
Yeah, it's a great question on a couple of different fronts, but the very first thing that I would say is we are collecting all publicly available information. And so I hone in on that because that's where we're starting. All this information is already out there. We're not trying to get in the way of investigations, right? Now, do we want to work with law enforcement? Absolutely, we want to work with law enforcement. What we have found as we have reached out to them, though, is there's a spectrum of those who want public help and those who have no interest in public help. And I'm not talking about it from a political aspect, right? But there's some very conservative members of law enforcement, and there's some very liberal members of law or progressive members of law enforcement who are reaching out. We work on a case in Baltimore, Maryland. The detective there who's been working on this case for almost 20 years has zero interest in the public knowing anything about this case. There has been money raised specifically for this case so that we can apply DNA technology to it. We feel like we could go and find who, get confirmation of who we think the killer is in that case. Law enforcement wants nothing to do with it. Talked about the case in Seattle, Washington. Detective Mickey Hamilton, he literally brought the case files, all of them, and said, here, help me. What are we missing? What can we do with your team, with your technology, with your community, and do that? So again, we do not want to hinder law enforcement's investigation, but by putting the information all together in one place, getting the news out there, we're able to stir up more conversation around it. And that's what's going to unlock that missing piece to hopefully solve these cases. As I say that, though, I do want to hit on one other thing. We cannot and will not promise families that we are going to bring justice in these cases. That we cannot do. Our goal and our stated mission is to bring peace to these families, because peace of mind of knowing what happened versus a conviction in a court of law, like those are just two completely separate things. And don't get me wrong, we'll help on the latter, but our goal is the former.
Yeah, no, excellent point. As we begin to wrap up here, a question for each of you. You're in a startup business, and as you well know, new business plans, they take various twists and turns, and you adjust to what is taking place. But if I put you on the spot, what might be a goal or a vision you'd like to see in 5 years, saying we were able to accomplish X? What would X be? I know, Anna, you touched on a little bit earlier, but if you can look out that far, what what are some of the goals that you would hope to be able to achieve?
I'll go first. We are currently working with Purdue University on some curriculum development with their forensics department. But we are in the early stages. We're really excited. We've got really great champions there. That is a game changer, I believe, in our minds, because we can get first and foremost in front of people who are going into these law enforcement careers and show them, here's a way you can work with public. Here's a way you can utilize data. Here's a way you can utilize technology. And getting people who are early adapters in this space to utilize a platform and see that, oh, their collaboration can happen and you can call upon people and you can really build this system of community around these tactics that you're learning in an academic setting. So I would say in the next 5 years, it would just tremendous to be able to see this as part of the curriculum development that is in forensic, that is in law enforcement, that is in the criminal justice curriculum as well.
Yeah, excellent. Jim, Anna, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my folk. Go ahead, Anna. I'll go second. I'll go last.
Sure. Yeah, well, I would say, so for me, I think again, being so product oriented and kind of the tech that we're building, I mean, you say 5 years, I think it would be incredible to be at a point where, uncovered is a verb now, and we talk about cases, and these cases have been uncovered, and that means they were put up on Uncovered, they were worked on by citizen detectives, and they were broke in some way. So when people talk about cases, they're like, oh yeah, I heard that case got uncovered. That's how I mean, that would be, I think that would be incredible. So
a great double meaning for Uncovered.
Exactly.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah, Jim, your thoughts?
For me, it's to be able to work closer with law enforcement. I'm glad you asked me that question earlier, right? But I believe strongly in the need for criminal justice reform. And I also want to start to get these wrongful convictions overturned. There's a lot of people sitting in prison right now that did not commit the crime, and technology is going to prove that, right? And so to be able to be part of the catalyst that allows us to get there is very important for me.
All right, last open-ended question. What have we not touched on? What's important for the listeners to know as you're growing this operation and serving so many people, and as Jim said so well, trying to bring peace to people involved? What else would you like listeners to know today before we wrap up?
I'm going to steal one of Ashley's lines here that she says, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. Right. So whatever your superpower is, whatever you can contribute, it could be financial resources. It could be your time. It could be the fact that you can type 120 words an hour. Whatever your superpower is, you can do something to help us solve these cases.
Yeah, I would agree. We have so many ways people can get involved. In 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, we just want people to come and contribute and see what they can do and what they can do for someone else.
Anna, you get the last word.
Yeah, I mean, if you think this is cool and you think this is interesting, come help us build it. I mean, we're still really early in this process. Like you said, businesses take twists and they take turns, and we've already taken quite a few twists and turns, and I'm sure there are definitely some on the road ahead of us, but come with us. Let's figure it out together.
And everybody can do that at uncovered.com. Ashley Fujawa, Anna Eaglin, Jim Brown, thank you so much for the time today, your insights, and best of luck in what you're doing. It's so important, as you mentioned, bringing all of this together for people and building this community. So best of luck with all your efforts. All right, just a couple reminders before we wrap up today with this episode coming to you in mid-July here. A reminder, the Indiana Chamber offices are back open and with most of our staff working hybrid schedules in the office part of the week, working remotely part of the week. But we're welcoming guests into the chamber for the first time in nearly 16 months. So some of you will be participating in meetings and other activities at the chamber. We look forward to welcoming you back into our home and then also continuing to connect virtually. As mentioned at the beginning, we have one more episode of this season of the In Chamber. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about ethics in the workplace, some fascinating work that Frank Walker of Walker Information fame has been doing for decades, and now there's a dedicated effort at Marian University regarding business ethics in the workplace. Thank you as always for listening to the In Chamber.